3 months ago, I celebrated my 101st birthday. You know what surprised people the most? It wasn't the birthday cake. It wasn't the candles. It wasn't even my age. It was the fact that after everyone finished eating, I was the one carrying the folding chairs back into the garage. One of my grandsons laughed and said, "Grandpa, sit down, we'll do it." I smiled and told him, "If I stop moving now, you'll have to carry me next year." My name is Walter. I'm 101 years old. I spent more than 40 years building houses with my own hands. I've climbed thousands of ladders, lifted more lumber than I could ever count, and somehow, by God's grace and a few good habits, my heart is still keeping up with me. Now, I'm not saying I move like I did at 30. Those days are long behind me. But I still wake up before sunrise. I still make my own black coffee. I still feed the birds that gather outside my porch every morning. And I still enjoy a slow walk down the old gravel road behind my house before the rest of the world wakes up. Those quiet mornings have become some of my favorite moments. That wasn't always the case. When I was in my early 90s, things began changing. Walking up a small hill left me breathing harder than it should have. Carrying groceries felt heavier. My chest didn't hurt, but I knew something wasn't quite right. Like an old truck that still runs, but doesn't sound the way it used to. During one of my checkups, my doctor looked over my numbers and asked, "Walter, what does a normal morning look like for you?" I expected him to ask about medicine. Instead, he wanted to know how I started my day. Then he said something I've never forgotten. "The first hour after you wake up often sets the rhythm for the rest of your heart's day." That sentence stayed with me. Because I've spent enough years working with tools to know, if you start a job the right way, everything else usually goes a little smoother. So I changed my mornings. Not overnight, one simple habit at a time. No miracle powders, no expensive gadgets, just ordinary routines that helped me feel steadier, stronger, and more energetic as the years went by. Today, people often ask me, "Walter, how is your heart still going strong?" Well, I don't have a secret, but I do have a morning routine. Before I share it, let me tell you something important. I'm not a cardiologist. If you have heart disease, chest pain, shortness of breath, or take medication for your heart or blood pressure, please work with your doctor before making changes to your routine. I'm simply an old carpenter, sharing what helped him care for the only heart he'll ever have. So, pull up a chair, pour yourself a cup of coffee, or tea if that's more your style, and let me show you the simple morning routine that's been helping this old heart keep a steady beat into my 101st year. The first thing I do every morning actually happens before I drink my coffee. Now, for a man who's been drinking black coffee since Dwight Eisenhower was president, that's saying something. For years I'd stumble into the kitchen, pour myself a big mug of coffee and call that breakfast. Then I'd head outside and start working. That routine followed me well into my 90s. I never questioned it. After all, I'd been doing it for decades. During one of my checkups, my doctor asked me, "Walter, do you drink anything before your coffee?" I scratched my head and said, "Nope." He smiled. "After a night's sleep, your body's gone several hours without water. Give your heart a little help before you give it caffeine." That seemed almost too simple, but over the years I've learned something. The simplest advice is often the advice we ignore. So now, the first thing I do every morning is drink a tall glass of water. Not ice cold, just cool enough to be refreshing. I don't gulp it down, I take my time. By the time the glass is empty, I feel awake. Only then do I make my coffee, and believe me, it tastes just as good, maybe even better. After my coffee is brewing, I don't sit back down. Instead, I step outside. The birds usually know I'm coming before I open the back door. They've been visiting my yard for years. I scatter a handful of seed, stand quietly, and watch the morning come alive. It only takes a few minutes, but those few minutes have become part of my routine. There's something calming about starting the day slowly instead of rushing into it. My doctor once told me that chronic stress isn't very friendly to the heart. I believe he's right. I've noticed that on mornings when I'm calm, the rest of the day seems calmer too. Then comes my favorite part, my walk. Now, when I say walk, don't picture me racing around the neighbourhood. At 101, I've got nothing left to prove. I simply walk at a comfortable pace. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes 20. If I'm feeling especially energetic, maybe a little longer. I've walked the same gravel road behind my house for so many years. I know every tree, every bend, every bird's nest. Those walks aren't about setting records. They're about reminding my heart that it was made to move. Years ago, when I was building houses, I learned something about tools. If you leave them sitting in the garage for months, they don't usually work better. They rust, they stiffen up, they need attention. Our bodies aren't much different. Movement keeps things working. Not hard movement, just regular movement, steady movement, the kind you can keep doing year after year. I've never believed you have to punish yourself to become healthier. I believe consistency beats intensity almost every time. One good walk today, another tomorrow, then another next week. Those little walks have added up to thousands of miles over the years. More importantly, they've added up to thousands of mornings that began with gratitude instead of hurry. But the biggest change I ever made for my heart didn't happen outside. It happened right there, at my kitchen table, and it had everything to do with what I decided to put on my breakfast plate. The biggest change I ever made for my heart didn't happen on my morning walk, it happened at my kitchen table. Now, if you'd walked into my house 30 years ago, you would have found a breakfast fit for a hard-working carpenter. A stack of buttered toast, a few strips of bacon, maybe sausage, 2 fried eggs, and enough salt to make my doctor shake his head today. Back then, I figured if I was working hard, I could eat whatever I pleased. For a while, that seemed true, until my body quietly started sending me different messages. After my heart scare in my 90s, my doctor didn't tell me I could never enjoy breakfast again. He simply asked me to think differently about it. He said, "Walter, don't just eat until you're full. Eat in a way that helps your heart do its job." That made sense to me. I've spent my whole life taking care of tools. Why wouldn't I take care of the engine that's been running inside my chest for over a century? These days, breakfast is much simpler. Most mornings, I make a bowl of oatmeal. I toss in a handful of blueberries if I've got them, sometimes a sliced banana, and a few walnuts for a little crunch. It fills me up without leaving me feeling heavy. Other mornings, I'll have an egg with whole grain toast and a piece of fruit. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just food that leaves me feeling steady instead of sluggish. One thing I learned was to stop treating salt like it was free. I used to shake it onto everything before I'd even tasted my food. Soup, eggs, tomatoes, didn't matter. The salt shaker was always the first thing I reached for. Now, I taste my food first. Most of the time, it doesn't need nearly as much as I once thought. Instead, I use herbs, a little black pepper, garlic, fresh parsley from the small garden behind my porch. Amazing what a little flavor can do without piling on extra salt. Another habit surprised me. I stopped eating in such a hurry. When I was building houses, lunch was often 10 minutes standing beside the truck. Eat fast, get back to work. That habit followed me into retirement. But now, I sit down. I chew slowly. I actually enjoy my meal. My wife used to say, "Walter, food tastes better when you give it your attention." She was right about a great many things. I've found that when I slow down, I naturally eat a little less. I notice when I'm satisfied, and I leave the table feeling comfortable instead of stuffed. It's funny how wisdom sometimes hides in the simplest moments. Looking back, none of these habits feel like sacrifices anymore. They're just the way I live. The oatmeal doesn't feel boring. The morning walk doesn't feel like exercise. The glass of water doesn't feel like a chore. They've simply become part of who I am. And that's the secret I've discovered after 101 years. Healthy habits stop feeling like work. Once they become part of your routine. Now, there's one final part of my morning that I believe has strengthened my heart just as much as anything I've eaten. And surprisingly, it has nothing to do with food, or walking, or even exercise at all. The last part of my morning routine has nothing to do with oatmeal, nothing to do with walking, and nothing to do with medicine. It has everything to do with slowing down. That might sound like strange advice coming from an old carpenter. For most of my life, I measured a good day by how much I got done. The more houses I framed, the more fences I built, the more jobs I finished, the better I felt. Even after I retired, I carried that same mindset with me. I always needed to be doing something. One morning, several years ago, I was hurrying through breakfast because I'd made myself a list of chores: feed the birds, mow the grass, fix the garden gate, sweep the garage. Before I'd even finished my coffee, I already felt behind. My daughter happened to stop by. She looked at me and smiled. "Dad, where exactly are you rushing to?" I didn't have an answer. At 100 years old, who was I racing? That question stayed with me. Later that week, I mentioned it to my doctor during a routine visit. He said something so simple, yet so wise. "Walter, your heart likes steady rhythms. Not just in your heartbeat, but in the way you live." That made sense to me. I've spent decades building houses. If you rush pouring a foundation, the whole structure can suffer. Strong things are built steadily, not frantically. So now, after breakfast and my morning walk, I don't immediately look for another job to do. Instead, I sit on my porch, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 15. I watch the birds argue over birdseed. I listen to the wind moving through the trees. I thank God for another sunrise. Some mornings I pray, other mornings I simply sit quietly. You know, silence isn't empty. It's often where gratitude has room to grow. I've noticed something over the years. When my mind is calmer, my whole body seems calmer. I'm more patient. I smile more easily. I don't become irritated over little inconveniences. If it rains, the grass will still be there tomorrow. If the mail is late, it'll come when it comes. I've lived long enough to know that very few things are true emergencies. Peace has become one of the healthiest habits I practice. Now, I want to leave you with one important thought. None of these habits guarantee a long life. I've known wonderful people who cared for themselves and still became ill. And I've known others who ignored every piece of good advice imaginable. Life doesn't come with guarantees, but healthy habits do give our bodies their best opportunity to serve us well. That's all we can really ask. If you have heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or you're taking medication, please continue working closely with your healthcare provider. My routine isn't a replacement for medical care. It's simply the routine that has helped this old carpenter care for the heart he's been blessed with. So when someone asks me, "Walter, how is your heart still going strong at 101?" I don't tell them there's a secret. I tell them there are small choices: a glass of water before coffee, a simple breakfast, a quiet morning walk, less salt, a slower pace, a grateful heart. None of them seem extraordinary on their own, but together, year after year, they've built a life that's still carrying me down that old gravel road each morning. Just like building a sturdy house, a strong heart isn't usually the result of one big decision. It's built one careful day at a time. Before I head out to feed my birds, I'd like to ask you something. How young are you today? And where are you watching from? I read as many of your comments as I can, and it always amazes me how many good folks from around the world stop by for these little morning chats. Thank you for spending part of your day with me. Take good care of your heart, take good care of the people you love, and remember, the strongest things in life, whether it's a house, a friendship, or a healthy heart, are almost always built slowly, patiently, and with care.